Good morning to the virtual audience. They're for the Smart Growth Subcabinet Public Forum. We will be starting approximately 9:15 due to some scheduling miscommunication with the Mako conference program. So please join us. But we will actually start the presentation, the forum at approximately 9:15. Thank you.
If you don't mind, it'd be
Are we on? Good morning, everyone. We're going to let people get settled in. We had a little bit of a disconnect between the time start, so we may have some people wandering in still. So I'm splitting the difference between what was a 9 o'clock start that we advertised to MDP versus the 9:30 start with the conference. And we'll just apologize prolifically and let everyone know we're doing the best we can. So we're going to start in about 2 minutes. For anyone that's here, grab your coffee, food, and we'll get rolling. But we will still wrap up at 10:45. So everybody can start moving toward the closing session. So about 2 minutes and we'll get rolling. Thanks. Okay. Good morning again. Thanks for all being here. And I really want to thank my colleagues, secretaries and directors and everybody and fill-ins for being here. We also have a couple folks from the subcabinet that are joining virtually. If you don't know me, I'm Rebecca Flora, Secretary of Maryland Department of Planning. And for those of you that didn't hear my earlier announcement, we had a little disconnect on timing. So we're going to be having a few people still rolling in. If anyone comes in and they didn't get the word outside, we are recording everything and everything's being posted online also. We'll still have our full public comment time. So we're just going to roll with the punches here and make it all come together. So anyways, with that, we're going to get started with, where's my clicker? Oh, and just to remind everybody, we do have an online audience. This is a hybrid. So as I mentioned, we're recording and everything will get posted actually on the Subcabinet webpage, which is part of the Maryland Department of Planning website. We have a page specific to the Subcabinet members, and everything will get posted from this public meeting. So with that, a few other logistical details about the virtual attendees. We had about 72 signed up virtually. You never know on a Saturday morning, depending on the weather, who's going to actually tune in. But we also welcome all of you virtually that are out there and for joining us today. It's always a little hard when I can't actually see you, but we do appreciate you all being here. And a lot of our virtual attendees or anybody that did register in advance provided us with any comments or questions that they might have for the Subcabinet members. And we have logged all of those, and we've reviewed them. And we will, wherever it makes sense as part of our closing round, respond to some of what we hear during the public segment, comment segment here, and then also what we may have heard coming in through the registration, and do our best. But if that doesn't create a direct response in any way, know that we're logging these, we're reflecting on them, and we'll also be looking at them at our next September Subcabinet meeting to just sort of see what people are thinking out there and what we need to be doing as a Subcabinet. So the virtual audience, unfortunately, is only listening. They will not be able to directly engage with us, but they are listening out there and hopefully taking in what we have to offer here today. Everyone in the room will have a chance to make any kind of public comment or question that you want us to be aware of. It won't be a direct Q&A so much as just, what are you thinking? And we'll get to that segment later on. And then we'll have a closing round to just share with you what's going on within our agencies. So in terms of the agenda, if you adjust everything by about 15 minutes and squeeze it up, I'm going to squeeze up that 9:15 to 9:30 segment. I think we'll have plenty of time to get through everything and still get finished by our 10:45 closing time, because I know several of us want to make it to the closing remarks. The governor will be speaking, and we'll all get out of here at 10:45. So, but you see that we have a couple of things we want to share with you: how we're evolving from smart to sustainable growth. What does that mean? Give you a few highlights around some of the legislative agenda that was assigned to our Subcabinet in 2023 that we've been working with, and then some of the new things that are coming out of the 2024, and then have our public comment time. And I want to just take a moment, of course, and introduce you to who is here with you from the Subcabinet. And we're just going to kind of go start at this end and just kind of go down and say your name, your agency. I know we've got the placards there, but then we'll, in the closing round, have a more of an extensive closing comment. So we just start down through so you all know who's here.
Good morning. Thank you, Secretary Farr. My name is Helene Grady, Secretary of Budget and Management.
Good morning, everyone. Portia Wu, Secretary for the Department of Labor.
Good morning. I'm Wendy Scott Napier, here for Secretary Chowdhury from the Department of General Services. Thank you.
Nice to see everyone. My name is Josh Kurtz. I'm the Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Howell. I'm the Director of the National Center for Smart Growth.
Good morning. I'm Jake Day, Secretary of Housing and Community Development.
Good morning. I'm Kevin Anderson, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Commerce.
Good morning. I'm Sanjay Rai, Secretary, Maryland Higher Education Commission.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Serena McElwain. I am the Secretary of Maryland's Department of the Environment. Good to see you all.
Also, good morning. I'm Paul Pinsky. I head up the Energy Administration for the Governor.
Good morning. I'm Russell Strickland. I'm the Secretary for the Maryland Department of Emergency Management.
And good morning. I'm Kevin Attic, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Agriculture.
Thank you all. So how often do you get this many secretaries and directors all in a room just for you? So we are thrilled to be here. And I think it gives you a sense of just how much this topic of smart to sustainable growth is an interagency topic. And the only way we're going to accomplish much is through all of us working and collaborating together, which we do very well. We actually really like and enjoy getting along with each other. So we have a lot of fun together. So what I want to do is take you through a few things that have happened this past year as we've tried to evolve the subcabinet and its duties and what we've done in terms of this evolution from smart to sustainable growth and where we're trying to go with that and working with others on that. So just as a reminder for those that aren't deep in this topic, to know that Governor Glendening, who will always be famous for this, started the first subcabinet and the Smart Growth Acts back in 1997. So 25 plus years later, I think we can all be very proud and very excited that there's been a lot accomplished through that. But in starting this whole subcabinet, the idea was to create this interagency forum for discussion on these topics, provide available resources, and ensure that we were all collaborating on all of these things around this notion of what was smart, but now we're trying to move towards sustainable. And what does that mean? And most importantly, we're here today because one of the things that we're required, but we actually also feel an obligation to be talking with you all and meeting with you and hearing what you have to say so we can take that into consideration as we meet and work as a subcabinet. And that's what we're here today doing. Our first for 2024 biannual meeting publicly with members of the public. And we try to do this at Mako. So there's an opportunity where people are already gathered so that we can be in person after those few years where we couldn't be in person. So it's a great opportunity for that. In terms of where we're headed with sustainable growth, one of the things that we did do last year with the legislation was essentially change out the word smart for sustainable. I'll get into that a little bit more, but the governor said it very well as an introduction and a welcome to the summit that was held and hosted by the National Center for Smart Growth. And that was the Smart Growth, where do we go from here? Summit that was held in May. Some of you may have attended that. If you want to hear his video, it's on our webpage. Specific to the subcabinet, but he really put it forth as we've been trying to frame it, is that for years we were very focused on where we grow in terms of very much of a conservation focus and preserving land, and we've done very well in that regard. And now we'd like to sort of build on that in terms of how we grow and for who, and really think more broadly around sustainable growth. So basically some of the changes that were made in terms of this code, the actual Subcabinet Act, is, first of all, it won't be effective to October 1. It doesn't really affect any of you that much. It was something for us to do internally in terms of really better describing who we are as a subcabinet and what we're focused on. A couple of things related to that is when the subcabinet was originally created, it was created in the office of the governor, and that was back during Glendening. After Governor Glendening left office, that office never really existed at the governor's office. It's always been over at Maryland Department of Planning. So we also did some cleanup. The other thing is there was a special secretary that was associated with it being in the governor's office. And so what we've done is basically take what was the vice chair being the secretary, Maryland Department of Planning, and making that the chair. And I am happy to say that the secretary of the Department of Housing and Community Development is now the vice chair, and Secretary Day and I are very excited about working closely together on this subcabinet. And I think we already work pretty closely together, so this is going to be even more fun. It identifies MDP as the primary office, which is already the case. But we did a couple of other really, really much more important things, which was the whole topic of a resiliency is something that I know many of you are already working on, and it's really critical to how we think about what's it going to take for communities to thrive. So we thought in order to be able to do that, we really needed to add the Maryland Department of Emergency Management Secretary to our subcabinet. So we have welcomed Secretary Strickland to our numbers, who's here with us today and has been with us really unofficial, but he'll be official in October. So we've done that. And then we've also added the whole topic of equity to our subcabinet, which really many years ago should have been, but wasn't as thoughtful. And we really want to immerse that through everything we're doing in terms of our work. We're all totally tuned into those issues in a variety of ways. And Secretary Day is going to be talking about this a little bit more in terms of the just communities. And so that's another aspect. But in the end, this move from smart to sustainable and thinking about not only neighborhood conservation, but vitality is a lot where we really wanted to move the subcabinet in its work. And those are just sort of a few highlights that happened with the amendment to that legislation, which we did have the full support of Governor Glendening in making that change this past session. So we're very excited about that and ready to begin that process of moving toward a more sustainable growth model. And that involves commerce and, you know, every single aspect of what we're doing in terms of what is sustainable growth. So what does that mean to us? Just another slide on this that I want to share with you is that, first of all, build on all the successes. The metrics that we have is that 700 acres have been preserved over these last few decades. And that we feel that the work of smart growth has had definitely a big influence on that. And then secondly, you know, in terms of sort of how we concentrate growth and development. But what does it mean moving forward? And that we really want to focus on other aspects of land use policy that really influence. And the key word is influence. I mean, there's a lot of factors, right? But they can influence, you know, our success in terms of economic growth, the availability and equitable access to housing and jobs. Public infrastructure investments. How do we invest? Where do we invest? How do we make sure every resource is used in the best possible way? And then, you know, I think most of us in this room get it, but not everyone does. But the whole aspect of climate change and mitigation and adaptation, I was tripping for that word, very much is influenced about how we grow and where we grow. And all of our climate goals can be much more reachable if we sort of think of this holistically and incorporate how does that relate to land use policy. But the outcome for us, and we will be trying to put some metrics around this, is to create thriving communities that are resilient to these ever-changing conditions. And these are all kinds of conditions that are happening. How do we make that resilient over time and help communities thrive? And that's what we're all about, working together collaboratively. So I wanted to share just kind of that overview with you of sort of how we're thinking about this moving forward. The next part of this is to really, well, what does that mean in implementation? A couple of things. We've started at the Maryland Department of Planning, and I know all of my colleagues are doing a lot of outreach also and doing regional meetings. You'd probably have multiple slides here if I really logged every single thing that's going on. We're all trying to get out there and in a variety of ways. One of the things we did at the Maryland Department of Planning is we did a series of 6 regional meetings, and very specifically, one aspect and one agenda item were the planning visions that I know the planners that we met with, which was our audience, very much knew what we were talking about. Not everyone always does, but they really create a framework for, think of them as planning principles or values that are in the code. But interestingly, as I came in last year and started looking at this, they don't necessarily align with all the other kinds of work that we're doing. So we're trying to figure out how do we update those visions, which are very much of a guiding principle type thing in code. How do we start creating better alignment, working with DHCD and some of the other programs and the other agencies around, well, what does that mean as a big umbrella? So looking at that update to today and to the future, and all the other things that touch that in terms of comprehensive plan elements. Sustainable growth metrics probably need to be put in place with that also, because you may have heard our governor is a very data-driven governor. So how do we know we're actually moving the bar if we don't have data to back that up? And so trying to figure out, well, what would those metrics look like? So those are the types of things we're looking at right now. We've already started conversations around in communities in a variety of different ways of sort of how do we begin to frame what is a sustainable growth model for the state of Maryland. And we think it starts with some of those core basic principles. So wanted to share that with you and mention to you some of that's already happened. I think we really started it actually even before the summit. National Center for Smart Growth had started a survey process, starting to reach out, just trying to get a sense of what people were thinking about, you know, how have we succeeded, what have we done? And then we built on that with the summit that occurred in May, and then these regional roundtables. And I already mentioned what's happening with the other agencies, and they can share some of that with you if they choose in the closing round. So that's a little bit about what we're doing. We're going to dive into the legislative and agency highlights, and these are just a few highlights. We couldn't even begin to list everything that's going on. But we wanted to share with you a couple of things that have been assigned specifically to the subcabinet and what our progress is on those and what's happening with that. And then we're going to have a couple of our Secretary Day and Secretary Kurtz will be talking specifically about the ones that they're very involved in. But just to give you an overview, in 2023 legislative session, there were 3 very specific legislative items that were tasked to the Sustainable Growth Subcabinet. One was the preservation and reuse of historic complexes, and that study was actually completed and approved at the end of 2023 and provided to the legislature. And so that process and the recommendations that came out of that, there is still work going on, but the study was completed, and you can find that if you go once again to the web page, you can find the link to this and to the study and get that full report in terms of the recommendations that came out of that. The other item that was assigned to us was the Maryland the Beautiful Act, and a 5-year plan associated with that. We're going to have a little bit more detail report on that from Secretary Kurtz, but that was officially approved by the subcabinet in June at our June meeting. And then the third one that was assigned in 2023 was the Equitable Inclusive Transit-Oriented Development Enhancement Act. The team lead on that one is MDOT. Unfortunately, we do not have anyone from MDOT in the room with us today, but I'll give you just a quick update on that. But the subcabinet did approve the criteria and the designation criteria at our July meeting, and then we'll have to continue to be involved and engaged in that process that relates to new designations. So we'll a little bit more information on that as we go on. So in 2024, I already mentioned and shared with you the Smart Growth Subcabinet amendment, so don't need to dwell on that any further. It will become effective October 1st. And so you will start seeing Sustainable Growth Subcabinet. We will stop using the word smart. You'll probably catch us more than once because smart comes out of the mouth easier. But we will be using Sustainable Growth Subcabinet moving forward in all of our references to that starting in October and on the website. We also want to share with you, and Secretary Day will be doing that, Governor Moore's housing package and some aspects of that that are particularly relevant to this subcabinet and the work of sustainable growth, and then also the Just Communities Act. So we'll dive into that and those items next. And so we're going to start with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources and ask Secretary Kurtz to come up here. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you this morning on the last day of Mako. Some bright-eyed, bushy-tailed individuals here today. Really appreciate it. Today, I wanted to touch on 2 pieces of legislation that were passed in 2023 and that we have really hit the ground running on in the terms of implementation. Both of these are really critical for sustainable growth and actually help us kind of advance and evolve some of the ways we've been thinking about our land protection programs. The first one I wanted to touch on was the Green Space Equity Program. And this bill really is the recognition of the multiple benefits that preserving green space provides for communities and recognizing that we have not done enough in our urban communities. And so what this bill does is it created a grant program for the department to administer $5 million every year. And it really pushes the innovative space through partnerships. So in order for these projects to be developed and applied for, you need to have a partner. It's a local government, municipality, nonprofit. There's a wide range of eligible partners that can participate in this program. And it can do 2 things. It can either do acquisition, and it can also do capital projects. So if you have access to land, but you want to create a pavilion, a place for people to gather, walking trails for human health, this program would allow you to do one of those or either of those 2 things. So I touched on this a little bit already, but the eligible applicants are land trust, non-governmental organizations, county or municipality. And these projects have to be in overburdened and underserved communities. That was defined by the legislation. And so we have a green space equity viewer. And so you can actually go online. We have mapped all the areas that fall under overburdened and underserved in the state. So this would be places would be eligible to receive this grant. We wanted to make it easier on the front end for those partners to identify those spaces. So I touched on this a little bit, but just to put a finer point on it, these are the kind of, this program can really help us increase our community gardens, food forests, community gathering spaces, help us think about interconnected habitats for wildlife in our urban core, which sounds a little bit strange, but I live in Crownsville and I see coyotes now all the time, which is really wild. So this program also allows us to think a little bit too about our natural and our urban interfaces. So this year we have $5 million. Our grant application is going to be open by October. There's a link to this. We hope to get a significant number of applications. And this is a program that we'll have every year at that $5 million mark. The next one is the Maryland the Beautiful Act. And the Maryland the Beautiful Act established the goal of 30% by 2030 and 40% by 2040 in terms of land protection. And I think having this be based out of the Sustainable Growth Subcabinet, there we go, I think is really important because of the number of agencies that have protection programs. The Department of Agriculture has the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation, which is a really important easement program to protect our ag communities and really maintain that way of life. We have at the Department of Rural Legacy program, open space, a wide range of programs, as well as easement programs. And so what we've worked to do is really align all of these efforts to achieve some pretty substantial goals. I will say, I think fantastic news. We have met 2030, the 30% by 2030, which is great. Although meeting 40% by 2040 is going to be a lot more difficult, frankly. And I think that's where programs like green space equity are really important for us to be able to achieve these goals and provide the benefits of preservation all throughout our society and all throughout the geography of the state. So just what did this do and what have we done? So as the secretary said, we put together a plan that was approved. It's online. Please feel free to take a look at that. And again, it really is about pushing that working together, especially by the cabinets and working really closely with some of the land trust community and many of you who are doing protection work in municipalities, counties all across the state. And so again, the big goal for us is going to be that 40% by 2040. It also created a local land trust revolving loan program. One of the things we recognize is that there are a lot of entities out there that are doing work to do protection. We wanted to make sure that they had access to capital that aligned directly to places that we wanted to do protection. So again, more funding, and also allows us to do more technical assistance as well. So we're excited about those programs which are rolling out now. If anybody has any questions about these or would like to tap into any of these grant programs, please feel free to reach out to me. I can direct you to our land acquisition and planning staff to be able to do so. And that's it for the Department of Natural Resources. Thank you all.
Great. Transportation. So I'm going to pinch hit for this, just a real couple notes about this. So interestingly, the legislature, we didn't ask for this, but they decided it, that they would move authority for TOD designations from the Secretary of MDOT, this was back in 2023, this happened, to the Smart Growth Subcabinet. And so as part of that, basically, we've had a working group around this, and essentially what happens is that the scoring criteria for TOD designations and the designation criteria was approved by the subcabinet. This gives you a sense of some of those criteria in July. Any new designations for TOD will come to the subcabinet for approval. Any designations that have expired, because they have 10 years, will come to the subcabinet for approval. And so this allows for more of this cross-agency basically lens on something that really does affect multiple different aspects of our work. And so more to come on that. MDOT will be rolling this out later in the fall. And then the subcabinet, you should know, will be engaged this as it relates to any of these new designations, and very excited about this. I think this is something we all look forward to being part of and engaged in. And on this one, each of these types of things, we always have an agency who's in the lead, but then we also have something called the Smart Growth Coordinating Committee, which is essentially all of our teams, quite frankly, we call them our very honored worker bees that really have to take a lot of this type of stuff and work within working groups and with subgroups and really get a lot of these things done and teed up for us. And so they'll be working on that more as we move towards fall and moving into that. And so next up, I would like to bring up Secretary Day to talk about some of the work he's involved in.
Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you all have had a great Mako, and we're excited for a Saturday morning talking about smart and sustainable growth. Actually, in this room, I believe you probably are. So look, I'm I'm eager to talk to you a little bit about the pathway to the governor's housing package this past year, as well as another bill that was really critical to us, as well as the pathway forward, where we go from here, which I'm sure is on the minds of many of the folks in the room and watching online. But let me start off just contextually saying that one of the things that that we all know is that every Maryland family is affected by their housing costs. Indeed, it's the #1 factor in inflation today in the United States of America, housing costs. And that means that up and down the income spectrum, that families are burdened by their rent costs, their mortgage costs. They're less likely to be able to move their family into a house that suits their needs in a neighborhood that they want to be. And indeed, polling done by Greater Washington and the Maryland Association of Realtors this year evidence that voters are, one, increasingly aware of this issue, increasingly concerned about it, and ready to hold their local and state officials accountable. They are expecting us, explicitly expecting us, to get involved and to do something. And so Governor Moore determined that we would and that we should, and the General Assembly agreed. I also want to acknowledge that that comes on the heels of a history of most of the innovation and leadership on addressing housing challenges coming out of county and municipal government. And so we're maybe late to the party, but we're here. And I also want to acknowledge that what got us here was really honest, difficult at times conversations that required a pretty safe forum, a coming together of representatives of MACO and MML and DHCD for what was a fall of crafting ideas and trying to, again, respond to these very real challenges that our constituents are asking for help for. So I want to acknowledge all the partners in that task force from MACO's end, as well as, again, MML and DHCD. So we know we have to do something about it. What I think really cannot be forgotten is that the comptroller's report did a great job of framing up that this is not just an affordability challenge affecting workers, but it has massive consequences on our economy and on Maryland's budget. And so all of those challenges add up to a drag on our economy, a lack of competitiveness when compared to our neighbors and compared to the national economy. And what that means is we are falling behind with an economy that grew by 1/10 of what America's did over the same 8-year period that the comptroller's report looked back at. And just recently, and I should have checked with Secretary Wu before I cite these figures, and if I get these wrong, just yell, correct me, throw your binder at me, whatever it may be. But I've recently heard the Secretary of Labor talk about location decisions for workers, as well as retirees. So looking at a deep analysis of the domestic migration patterns. And I think it's really telling that the #1 thing driving people's decision to leave this state is their housing costs. #2 is commuting times, which, oh, by the way, is directly connected to how we design and build our communities. And where are they leaving for? Okay, some are going to Florida, I'm sure. Some are going to Texas, yeah, the Sun Belt. But they're leaving for Pennsylvania. They're leaving for Virginia, Delaware, West Virginia. And so they're probably still working at Fort Meade. They're probably still commuting into Maryland, but what they want for their family is unaffordable here, because we're doing the same thing that most of America did for the last 15 years, underproducing housing, dramatic. There's a recent, and I forget the website name, but Scott, you might remember. There's a website that tracks building permit issuance and units created across every American county. You remember the name of that? Was it from Up for Growth? Maybe it was. Yeah, I think it was. And so from that website, you can look at the arc of unit production in virtually every county. The arc is virtually the same. We all look the same. So even a marginal increase in recent years is nothing compared to where we ought to be. So we need to obviously unlock Maryland's economy, and we need to help more Marylanders turn the key on a new housing opportunity for themselves. So you've heard the number 96,000 housing units. That's how we framed the shortage using the up for growth number. That is arguably a conservative estimate, that there are indeed 120,000 potentially units short if you look at other figures that are put out there. But whatever it is, whether it's 150, 120, 96,000, we are behind and getting further behind. Maryland is short an additional 5,600 housing units per average per year. So we are not catching up. And production has a number of challenges too, right? There's financing. And some of these are macroeconomic, yes, but there's resources, yeah. And so those financial barriers are very real. There's also regulatory barriers. And that is a state and local responsibility. Most of those barriers exist in state or in local government. And so we have to have frank conversations about how we can speed processes up, make processes more predictable, and maybe more affordable at times. Control the levers we can. In my conversations around the state, we often get asked the question, who's doing it best? And there are a lot of great answers to that. But I think the best that we can do is recognize that those macroeconomic factors, planning commission chairs can't control the price of lumber, right? A county executive can't change global interest rate environment. But what we can do is improve the speed of doing business, the predictability of doing business, and also the cost of doing business. So the legislative package this past year, Governor Moore's 2024 housing package, was designed to respond to that, and in three pieces. You can see it was designed to respond to the first two barriers, regulatory and financial, with the Housing Expansion Affordability Act and the Housing and Community Development Financing Act, and I'll briefly talk about each. It was also designed to recognize that as we do that, there are many Marylanders at the lower end of the income spectrum who are subject to, at best, a turbulent rental market, at times a predatory one. And so if we can improve life for them in the meantime, we ought to. And that's what the Renters' Rights and Stabilization Act was about. I also want to talk to you about a departmental bill. I'll get to that in just a moment, that Secretary Flora mentioned, the Just Communities Act. So HEAA, the Housing Expansion Affordability Act, House Bill 538, it does fundamentally two things. Number one, it allows by right modular and manufactured housing throughout the state. And number two, it allows for developers to elect to use a density bonus by right over and above whatever the underlying zoning is. It recognizes that the zoning landscape across the state is designed at the local level with certainly some state influence. The state has been historically very good about protecting our ecological resources, protecting our agricultural land, our rural heritage. We have not always been great about encouraging doing the right thing in the right places. Very good at saying, don't do the wrong thing in the wrong places. We want to be better at encouraging doing the right thing in the right places. And so the density bonus, that 30% bonus, allows for developers to, in 3 locations, one within 3/4 of a mile of an existing or planned rail transit site, or number two, on a former state or federal owned campus, and number 3, on a nonprofit owned property. That third is the one that touches all 24 jurisdictions. That's a lot of real estate. Nonprofit owned property represents a lot of real estate. And obviously this is all within growth areas, and all other regulatory restrictions apply. But there's a fundamental underlying piece that guides this, which is also it targets unreasonable restrictions placed on the permitting process. Unreasonable can be defined as anything that affects density, viability, or affordability, which is a very broad set of government restrictions. Now, this is the one where I think this is the piece of legislation where we'll probably get the most questions. And I would encourage you to go to dhcd.maryland.gov. At our Turning the Key site, there's a big banner right across the front of the page. where information is being posted, guidance to local elected officials. This should not be taken as a substitute for legal advice to developers, but it is OAG reviewed. And we will ensure that all of the regulatory guidance that we adopt abides by the OAG review process. The first FAQ is already posted, was posted on Monday. The first FAQ is up. So if you go to that site, you will find guidance to planning officials as well as local elected and appointed officials. So critically, I understand that there are lots of questions, but I want you to understand this. If you take nothing else away, the law as written does not intend for you at the local level to adopt or modify any of your regulations. You don't have to. We've had lots of questions that say, well, we haven't yet adopted 538. We haven't yet adopted, changed our zoning law to comply with 530. You don't need to. Your underlying zoning applies. Your underlying zoning is not exempted. It exists and is acknowledged. This is a 30% density bonus over and above. I do want to note that there is also an affordability requirement, which differs based on the type of the land use in those three uses, but there is an affordability requirement as well. So we're advising, we're talking, we'll have one-on-one conversations, but I want you to know that we will be constantly uploading new information to the Turning the Key site. So I encourage you to go there to look. The Housing and Community Development Financing Act, the second bill intended to address some of those financing challenges, does two things. Number one, it expands the eligible uses of the state strategic demolition program. That is a state revitalization program. It expands uses to include credit enhancements, which broadens the ways in which we can apply resources into projects. Second thing it does is it established the Maryland Community Investment Corporation. That is a new non-government, but quasi-governmental in that the governor appoints the board, entities akin to Medco, TEDCO, and it allows us to pursue new markets tax credits. It's a CDE will be pursuing this fall U.S. Treasury certification and designation as a CDE. It'll be the 6th in Maryland, but the only one restricted to putting its dollars into Maryland low-income communities. And so by statute, it's focused on our communities. 5 of the board members are state officials, including the comptroller and 4 cabinet officials, and 2 representatives, one of nonprofit communities and one of low-income communities, nonprofit organizations and low-income communities. And so that entity will be pursuing, beginning immediately. We just hired a CEO. We'll be beginning immediately pursuing new markets tax credits for catalytic projects. On average, $50 million tax credits per project into Maryland communities. So we'll be looking for your key catalytic projects that are in desperate need of resources in your communities, from housing of all types, including home ownership, to community development, community facilities, even, of course, business growth, manufacturing, and beyond. The third bill, the Renters' Rights and Stabilization Act, I'll be really quick on, is a bill that was, again, designed to acknowledge that turbulent system that renters find themselves in, and to also point out that we have a dynamic in Maryland that's untenable. We have the highest eviction filing rate in America and the lowest eviction filing fee in America. It rights that by increasing the eviction filing fee, intending to bring down the eviction filing rate, restricts the ways in which it can be passed on to renters, creates an office of tenant and landlord affairs within DHCD, and also mandates by law there will be an addendum to all leases signed in the state. That addendum is a tenant's bill of rights that will be put forth by that new Office of Tenant and Landlord Affairs. It also creates the first statewide tenant opportunity to purchase and right of first refusal in America, making that a 24 jurisdiction program. The last thing I want to talk to you about is the Just Communities Act. The Just Communities Act is intended to address one of our top priorities in DHCD and for the governor, which is righting the wrongs of the past. In housing development, in housing finance, we have a history. Even in community redevelopment, we have a history. of visiting our worst upon those who could least afford to do anything about it, and typically doing it to Black communities. We have a history of racist housing policies in America and in this state. And the way we reverse those is not through wishes and hopes. It's through deliberate counteraction. The Just Communities Act empowers the governor to designate certain communities based on their history of redlining, urban highway construction, and even the use of financing and funding tools like urban renewal, which often robbed wealth from Black communities and neighborhoods by erasing many of those neighborhoods. I was standing on a lot that's now a parking lot in Salisbury, which used to be referred to as Black Main Street just the other day. It allows the governor to designate those just communities and then to direct from any funding program in the state to prioritize just communities over other places within that funding program. Could be a DHCD program, could be MDOT or others. But I think it's important to note that this is how we begin that deliberate counteraction. And additionally, we created the Division of Just Communities and the Assistant Secretary of Just Communities at DHCD, who is leading that effort and with her team. So with that, I've probably gone over time, so I'm going to stop. I know there are some questions, but we'll be happy to answer those in just a little bit. Oh, do I? Oh, I'm sorry. This was really critical to my earlier point. dhcd.maryland.gov/turning the key. But again, if you just remember dhcd.maryland.gov, you'll be fine. You can go and click on these subscriptions. As you can see, we've broken it down by audience to ensure that elected officials, as well as their planning staffs, and planning commissioners are engaged, development teams, renters, homeowners, banks, et cetera. Also want to point out, we're partnering with our other agency colleagues to do listening sessions, and we're going to take every opportunity. If you need a DHCD staffer to come to you, to come to a planning commission meeting and help you, we're happy to do it. Come meet with your staff, your team, name it. We're happy to be engaged. Okay. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Secretary. I think that's that all was in the first year. So we have so much to do, but I think, we'll get more done the more we collaborate and the more we work across the agencies. And I'm excited about this subcabinet as an opportunity for that. So now it's your turn. Okay. We have a couple folks with microphones. Where are my folks in the audience with the microphones? Hold up your hand. Where'd they go? What's that? Okay. Okay. So we have an opportunity for any of you out there that's here in person to share with us what you're thinking. Share your comments, your thoughts, your reflections, your ideas. We're listening. So we are going to just sit quietly and listen and give you all a chance to make comments. We have a couple of things that we just ask in that process. We do want to make sure there's time for everybody. So please, try to keep your comment as short as possible. I'm not going to put a timer on, but we'll just ask you to try to keep that in mind. We are recording everything, so we'll also be able to sort of go back and make sure we've recorded all of those questions that came to us, or comments or ideas. And we're just going to open up this time right now for anything anybody wants us to hear. And I'm going to sit down and we're just going to be in listening mode. So who has the microphones? Okay, Al has one out there, and anyone else in my team? Okay, well, let's start there. Just go ahead, please. Oh, would you please make sure you say your name and your affiliation very loud so we just know where you're from. Thank you.
Okay, I am Deborah Carpenter, and I'm with Frederick County and planning and permitting. So my question has to do with competing goals. So the state has very good goals for conservation and affordable housing and renewable energy and all of those good things. We also have the goals and percentages that we need to meet by certain dates. I think there's a concern about those percentages continuing to grow and the dates continuing to get shorter. There also comes to mind for me the phrase of there are lies, damn lies and statistics, right? So at some point, are we starting to change the measurements by which we make these percentages so that we can meet them by our deadlines? And an example would be agriculture. We want to conserve, and we also want renewable energy, right? So there's talk of now saying that the pollinator plantings that are required already by PSC, now we can call them agriculture. CT Wilson said yesterday that a solar farm is a true farm because it produces something. If that's true, a factory producing widgets is a farm. So the question is, how is the sustainable subcabinet going to ensure that we don't have a slippery slope with our good intentions to create more problems in the future?
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you very much. Definitely want to consider that. Anyone else out there? Don't be shy. Okay, we have another hand up here, and then we'll go over here. Andrew, we have a hand over here that'll be next.
Hi, thank you so much for being here and for your vision for the state of Maryland. My name is Heather Iliff. I'm president and CEO of Maryland Nonprofits. We're a statewide association of nonprofit organizations and part of a wide coalition of advocates calling for the Fair Share Plan to address Maryland's revenue crisis. We're really excited about the Moore-Miller administration's goals, and we have also a lot of goals for community development, and housing is a huge just pillar of everything that nonprofits are trying to do to get people into jobs and get people into self-sufficiency. And we run up against this housing barrier in every jurisdiction in the state. And just simply more resources are needed. And with the big fiscal cliff coming at the end of COVID funding, we just really need to address this. So I want to thank Secretary Grady. I don't envy your job. But the Fair Share Maryland plan calls for higher taxes on the wealthiest Marylanders, combined reporting for corporations. These are sensible solutions that other states have done. Low and moderate income Marylanders pay higher proportions of their taxes, state and local taxes, than high income Marylanders. And the Fair Share Plan corrects that for an equitable tax system and also plugging a huge amount of the revenue gaps that we're seeing over the next year and several years. And also, we're all hearing about low and middle income Marylanders really being squeezed by prices at the grocery store, prices in healthcare, prices in education, et cetera, housing. And this plan includes some relief in terms of the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. So I would just ask all members of the administration to embrace this, members of MACO to support it. We just came out of the session talking about the challenges of the blueprint. These are goals that are the right goals for the state of Maryland. We may need some tweaks, but when we put those big goals in place, we need to pay for them, and we can't afford it. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for sharing all of that and for being here. Thank you. Over here.
Good morning. My name is Robert Mayer, and I'm with Kaboom, a national nonprofit that has a mission of ending place-based inequity. We have been working in Maryland for almost 30 years and have built dozens of play spaces. And today we find ourselves in the unfortunate and unenviable position with the realization that the infrastructure we have built in some of the most disinvested communities across the state are contributing to the acute heat problem those neighborhoods face. The traditional style playground built with lots of plastic and metal, dark surfaces and open air spaces without shade is contributing to the heat problem many of the neighborhoods we want to help are faced with. A playground can act as a heat sink and raise the temperature in that neighborhood anywhere from 6 to 10 degrees, and the equipment can get up to temperatures as high as 160 degrees, even on days when it's only between 85 and 90, which we are having fewer of each summer. We are acting aggressively to address this problem through new design guidelines that we're working on internally, but we would like to encourage the members of the subcabinet in furtherance of Governor Moore's commitment to environmental justice to work with local communities to come up with new guidelines around outdoor recreational infrastructure that will help remove the plastic and metal in these neighborhoods, create more opportunities for shade, both natural and manufactured, which can improve air quality, change color schemes and other common sense solutions that will help reduce the incidence of heat related illnesses that many of the children in these communities already face. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Robert. Thank you for sharing that. Really compelling issues that we have going on with some of those areas. Thank you. Anyone else over here?
So Jamie Williams with Kent County Economic and Tourism Development. And I'm concerned about the competitiveness for businesses in Maryland. So I just want to be very cognizant of that as we talk about how we grow. As one of the counties with stagnant growth, with residents and businesses, how do we increase our commercial tax base, assessable base, to be able to raise revenues within our counties without having that go on the residents, which directly relates to the housing crisis? So I just want to be very cautious of that and consider that. And I want to thank the Secretary panel for being here. And thank you for all the work that you do. And Kent County really appreciates everything that you guys have done for us. And we continue to work on trying to grow the economy in Kent County and appreciate the partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you so much. Other questions out there? What's on your mind? Over here. Yeah. Al, you want to take this side over here?
Hi, my name is Rob Watson. I'm a principal with Upland Road Developers. I'm an ex-Maryland resident, now in New York. I had the privilege of working with Secretary Flora for many years. I founded the LEED Green Building Rating System back in the early 90s. And after implementing about 50 million square feet of projects on 4 continents, I realized that the problem wasn't with the structure of the standard, it was the structure of the industry. We are dealing with legacy 20th century structures that are structurally incapable of delivering 21st century solutions. In other words, we're trying to go to the moon with a hot air balloon. So we need to really rethink structurally how our industries are put together and what those structures, how those structures impede our ability to get to our solutions. In the waste sector, for example, which is where I'm doing now, we're trying to bring $1 billion projects to Maryland to take waste, separate it, turn it on the same campus into new products and clean energy. But the legacy 3-bin solution impedes that. And so our 1-bin solution, because what our technology does is separate mixed waste, is being opposed by the industry because they've got a legacy system that they're trying to protect. The other big challenge that we have in locating our facility in Western Maryland that we've been working on is that we don't have housing for the 300 to 500 jobs, particularly the highly qualified people to run paper manufacturing, plastic manufacturing, et cetera, that will be located on our campus. And so finding qualified people and finding good housing are very significant impediments to bringing these kinds of projects to areas that have been traditionally underserved. But we're really interested in working with the state. We're committed to bringing these things here. Look forward to working with the panel and making this happen. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Good to see you after a while. Thank you. Another hand that, did I see go up? Oh, sure.
Hi, Pete Lesher, Talbot County Council. Talbot County seeks to play a role in open space preservation, in ag preservation, and we've taken an active role in that. We have limited tools to be able to do that. And in discussions with our municipalities over annexation policy, we have exactly one tool in our tool chest that I'm aware of, and that's the 5-year hold on zoning. Is that the appropriate tool? Is it the most powerful tool that county should have in the pursuit of ags and open space preservation? And does the Smart Growth Cabinet have a vision for how counties should be playing a role in that?
Thank you, Pete. Thanks for being here. Any other hands? Comments? Going once? Oh, okay. We got one over here. We won't force the issue, but want to make sure everyone has an opportunity.
Rich Madalino, the Chief Administrative Officer of the Montgomery County Government. I've still been overwhelmed by Secretary Kurtz's comments about coyotes and one of the issues that we are struggling with, and the county executive is in the room, so hopefully I'll get his point well, is our inability to move forward with infrastructure, which is the basis for whether it's economic development, building strong communities, building a good education system. And we got to figure out a way that we can get that infrastructure done. We expand transit to make sure we're getting people off the roads, dealing with congestion, dealing with our bottlenecks. But it would be wonderful if the subcabinet could push forward with some of the ideas about how we fund infrastructure so that we can make the changes everybody wants. If we're going to move forward with transit and transportation opportunities for the 21st century, bus rapid transit, we need to find a way to do it with not just the state, but of course our friends and neighbors in the District of Columbia and Northern Virginia. So trying to be innovative. I hate the phrase think outside the box, but I don't know how we move forward with this without that sort of effort and without the strong support of the subcabinet to push forward the General Assembly to look at some of these issues, to find the models from around the world so that we can make the investments that we know our communities need in order to achieve all the wonderful things the Moore Miller administration wants to do.
Thank you, Rich. And yeah, with every problem brings innovation, right? So I think the more minds we can put together and the more partnerships, the more opportunity. Anyone else out there, or are we pretty much done? Oh, we have one hand up over here.
Thank you. I'm Diana Abney, the health officer for Charles County. And I just want to put in a plug for the green space equity and community gardens and more walkability, because indeed, not only do we need progress and things like that, we need to keep our citizens healthy so they can do all the things that we do to make Maryland great. And there are a lot of citizens who don't have access to those things. So community gardens are available for people who need food. The University of Maryland did something similar to that in their areas near Hyattsville, where people who didn't have access to food on a regular basis could go to parks and could pick food from edible trees and edible bushes like blueberries and things like that. That is something we can do here in Maryland with our open spaces. It's something I'm trying to work on in Charles County. And just think how much that would make our area beautiful and how much that would help our citizens.
Great. Thank you so much, Anita. Okay. Anyone? Well, we're going to do our closing round then. And so the next stage of this is, and please, always, this is just one forum, we're here for you. So could I just get a raise of hands in the room of agency staff that are in the room? So people know there's people out there. You're sitting next to us. We're all one. We're all in Maryland. So, if you're not comfortable speaking out in the meeting, feel free to just grab one of those folks and share what you're thinking. Because we know not everyone is meant to stand up in a public meeting. So feel free to always reach out. So the next stage of this is we did want to do a closing round. And this is a chance for each of the secretaries to reflect on either some of what you just heard, some of the questions that came in earlier that have been shared, or ways in which your agency may be working on some things that maybe you want to share with the group out here that everyone should be aware of, because, information is power. So the more we kind of know what's going on and we're hearing, and we can bring that together and try to come up with solutions, I think it moves us all forward. So I am going to pick on Secretary Anderson and have you go first. We'll go down this way and then we'll come back up this way. How does that sound? Oh, we need a mic over here for Secretary. Yep.
Exactly.
And we'll just start down the road.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks so much, Secretary Floyd. And thanks for everybody's rich comments and thoughts. And it's a real privilege to go first, being mindful that it's about 10 of us. And I think we have about a half an hour to get through. I'm not going to really kind of go with a lot, but we could get it done. This is critically important. the Sustainable Growth Subcabinet is a major part of rebuilding our economy. You've heard the governor be very, very clear about where we are at GDP with our flat growth in our economy. We have to grow. We are relying on the Sustainable Growth Subcabinet to make sure that our land use policies and our entitlements are clear in order for us to grow. GDP is 70% of GDP is made up of consumer spending. That's about people. You heard Secretary Day give you the clear path of where it affects in housing. Secretary Wu could talk for an hour about how it affects our workforce. Secretary Wiedefeld could talk for an hour about how our transportation needs need to get coordinated. In order for us to have very clear and balanced growth, our land use policies have to be very clear. We got dinged a little while ago because the state of Maryland, we were not prepared as much as other states to be as competitive and as aggressive as we need to, because some of our land use issues weren't very clear in the space of how we're competing with others to be able to bring business. And I know Jamie just talked about that. So as we begin to move forward, this planning, this is the blocking and tackling. The governor and Secretary Grady is all the way on the other end. This state has to grow. And in order for it to grow, we have to attract vibrant businesses, and that entire ecosystem has to move in the same direction. It can't just be a business that gets to a space in a community that just has to exist. We have 24 jurisdictions carved up in that piece, and it cannot be a one-off. We have to make some very big bets and some investments so that can move. And again, Secretary Grady can tell you, our budget and our spending is doing this, and our economy is stagnant in doing this. GDP across the state is uneven. So some of our communities are less vibrant. Some of our communities are less opportunistic. Some of our communities are less clear about our policies. So just to share that from the subcabinet and what we share, and I also operate a commerce subcabinet where we're very clear about what we need to do to grow the economy. This is about being clear about attracting businesses to Maryland, about leveraging all of our military installations that we have, leveraging the fact that we're the second most educated state in the country, leveraging the fact that we're the 7th richest state in the country, and making sure that those resources can come to play, that we can cure what is a very, very critical disconnect in our spending and our growth versus where our growth and where our economy is going. So again, super thanks to all of my colleagues. And I was just very, very proud that Secretary Day can state the case. Secretary Wu will state the case. Secretary Wiedefeld will state the case. From Secretary Rye will state the case as well about how all of these have to work together now. And when we begin to make our bets and when we talk about attracting businesses, it is very important that we move together or this needle will not move. We will be talking again about what is an historical space of Maryland in their reactions to say, well, we'll raise taxes. Cannot happen. It is out. We have very, very sophisticated conversations about what we have to do about expenses, what we have to do about revenue, and most important, what we have to do about growth. So that's the space. Again, I won't go off for a long time. I'm sorry. Secretary Floyd and I locked at the hip about that because when we come and when it happens, and I know our Frederick County partner sees it, when it comes, we cannot play catch up. Our land use entitlement policies cannot, be in a space where they aren't working for us as a state. So I'll stop. I'm sorry. So off the soapbox.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Anderson. I think you have pretty much said everything that needs to be said. But just a few other things. Sanjay Rai, Secretary of Higher Education. In higher education, state of Maryland, I think we have a very strong and comprehensive system of higher education, 16 outstanding community colleges, 22 private independent universities, 14 publicly supported universities. So, what are some of the exciting things that we see happening? Number one, from this year, all of you have community colleges in your jurisdictions. Promise Scholarship $15 million program from the state of Maryland now is available to part-time students who are pursuing an associate degree. This is kind of last dollar after they get their federal assistance, whatever is the gap, Promise Scholarship will pay for that. But even more exciting there is that now this scholarship is available to non-credit students, students who are in the non-credit areas. If you're doing a cybersecurity certificate, if you're doing a commercial truck driver license, or if you're doing an HVAC certification, it's all available to you. So, make sure that your students are aware, your constituents are aware. And for all the county executives and county leadership that's here, support your community colleges. That is your best ROI. In terms of economic competitiveness, we are coming up with very ambitious goals on research and innovation coming up at our own universities. We are looking at sponsored research that's coming to our institutions of higher education. If there's a company doing R&D development, are they doing it by themselves or they're coming to our institutions of higher education? That brings our own research closer to what's happening in business and industries. We are looking at how many startups are being created at our campuses, how many patents are coming from our campuses, and what is the market value of those patents. In terms of academic programs, research programs in emerging areas of our economy, our institutions are creating PhD programs, master's programs, undergraduate programs in computational biology, in artificial intelligence, in quantum computing, in data science. So our higher education institutions are doing a great job, and our higher education is certainly one of the best funded higher education system in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to keep mine short and sweet. For me, representing Maryland's Department of the Environment and the environment, for me, it's all about climate change and resiliency. So I really think that both state and local governments, we really need to, all of you and us as a state as well, meaning from the department level, we need to think about climate change and resiliency as part of the growth plans that we have. There is no either or win-lose. It's about keeping it in mind. Everything we do, we need to think about climate change because it is real. We're getting a lot of questions and concerns in my agency about flooding and erosion. And so we need to think about all of those things when we're thinking about growing and in particular areas. There are sea level rises in particular areas. Think about that when you're going there and thinking about development. We're going to have more storms. We're going to have more rainfalls. We're going to have more floods. So again, even though we need to grow, and it is very important, please keep in mind what's going on with climate change. We haven't fixed it yet. It's going to take a long time to reverse the damage that's already caused. So we have to just be protective of ourselves, of our families, and of homeowners today. That's my message. Thank you.
It's not shocking that I sit next to the Secretary of the Environment because a lot of our work overlaps. So thank you. Rebecca, in her opening comments, talked about where we grow and how we grow. And that has implications for our agency, the Energy Administration, ensuring you have energy where you live and what type of energy. And I want to come back to that. The other is, she mentioned sustainability. And I want to underline that because that brings us to the question of climate change, which my good colleague here talked about. Look, we know it's real. And how and where we locate and grow is affected by that. Flooding, Annapolis 3 weeks ago was under 2 or 3 feet downtown. You know, whether it's heat domes, you talked about the playgrounds, whether it's sea level rise, even here in Ocean City. There are a lot of issues, and severity of storms, of course. The governor has called for 100% clean energy in the fairly near future. The Climate Solutions Now Act, which is the law of Maryland, calls for a 60% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2031. And there are 2 guideposts. But our agency, our charge is to promote clean, reliable, and affordable energy. and also to promote reduction in greenhouse gases. And we overlap with that as Department of the Environment. We take our lead from them in many of these, but to do all of it through the lens of Justice 40. You know, for far too long, a lot of the conversation and the investments, for example, EV chargers, you know, they were in homes of people who could afford to have a detached home with a garage, and they put in a charger, who also were in the first wave of people who bought EVs. And to be frank and transparent, that was middle class and upper middle class and predominantly white communities. But there was just like a blind spot, and I think Jake Day spoke about that earlier, about investment in another segment of our society. And they shouldn't be the last. They are part of the solution, and we are changing that. We are changing our investments. And the governor, and I'll probably say it in a half hour or 45 minutes, of leaving no one behind. So, for example, we are shifting our money. And while the cost of the EVs come down, the Bolt and the Kia now are $20,000 and $32,000. You don't have to pay $80,000 for the fancy Tesla or Mercedes. And we're hoping that working and poor people who have to buy a car in some cases if they don't have mass transit, who might live in a multifamily in an apartment building. So we need to have an infrastructure that services them. So we've got to shift some of our investments so everyone is part of the solution here, you know, and because we can't ignore that. It is a long struggle. It's a heavy lift, as my colleague just talked about. We have to shift in a number of ways. We have to change our fossil fuels. We have to electrify. We cannot rely on gas and oil. That's the 20th century. It's the 21st century. We realize our solutions are going to come from electrons, not from pipes. And somebody talked about buildings and changing buildings. Well, transportation is the largest contributor to greenhouse gases, and buildings are the second. So whether it means getting solar on the roofs or electrifying and putting in heat pumps, or hopefully using geothermal if possible, we got to make that transition. There's no time to waste. And we are investing in schools. We talk about planning. Every community has a school. We now have schools that are carbon net neutral. What that means is they produce more clean energy, all clean energy, than they use. It's a net positive. They're building schools with geothermal little pipes in the ground under their soccer field that keep water at 55 degrees. They're using a heat pump instead of a gas furnace, and putting solar on the roofs. So part of our planning, part of our vision has to be including all of that as we do plan, as we do develop, getting back to the question of where we develop and how we develop. So we want to be a part of that. And let me just close with this, and I've gone on too long. We have numbers of grants, whether it's heavy and medium duty trucks. We now can help pay for electrified trash trucks for communities, for counties. You know, we can help put solar on your public works department or on your local library. So we want you to utilize us. We have some revenue. We're not, as I've said before, sending out blank checks, but we want to help you. We want to pay the marginal cost to move ahead and see innovation. We want Maryland to be a leader, and we're proud to be part of that.
Thank you, Director Pinsky. Secretary Strickland, I think you've been teed up, and I just want to do a time check. We have 15 minutes to go.
Okay, that sounds good. That means talk fast. So we're the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, and the first thing everybody sitting in the room is wondering is, why are we sitting here? Well, once upon a time in Boy Scouts, I learned that proper prior planning prevents a poor performance. One bad day in your life, or one bad day, can ruin your life. And with good planning, which is where we're doing a paradigm shift in emergency management and within the emergency management profession, is to focus before boom, whatever that boom might be, whether it be climate related, whether it be cyber related, whether it be nation state threat related, but we need to start planning before boom and mitigating and building resilience so that when we do have to respond, it's less expensive and recovery will be quicker and safer for all. We exist for the survivor. So we're happy to be the newest member of this group, and we'll be the ones that are probably always going, yeah, but, and we'll continue that effort, but we're very proud to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Addix.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Couple of quick notes. I'll just make some statements. We've heard about the where of how to grow, the how of how to grow, and in the world of agriculture, we tend to be in the what of what to grow. And can I see a quick show of hands of how many of you are rural? Okay, well, the rest of you eat, so it's important. The P in preservation stands for profit. We have to make sure that while we are preserving farms, we are also making sure that farmers have an ability to evolve and get out of the legacy regulatory constructs that we just heard about and industry constructs and think differently so that farmers are able to make the things that we, the neighbors, the millions of customers that live right down the road want to buy. It was mentioned that we need to be more business friendly. That's unequivocal. We have to. I'm sick of meeting with creameries as I'm going around the ice cream trail and hearing that while they're making ice cream, because they can do that, they have to send their milk to Pennsylvania to turn it into cheese and bring it back to sell it to me. Ridiculous. That should be made here. Food forests. I visited Montgomery College this past week and saw some amazing work that's being done on what otherwise would have been just mowable, weed whackable spaces. Within a year or two, students will be walking by, community will be walking by and eating all of it, hopefully more than the deer eat. When you talk about the legacies, I heard the concern about starting an industry, starting a facility and not being able to have affordable housing nearby. Legacy constructs. Do you know how many farms are sold because there are 2 lots but 3 children? And they have to sell the farm because they can't agree. Why aren't we putting 6 tiny homes on an acre? Right? There are things that we can be thinking about that are not resource intensive, that actually become a net. Good for the tax base. Stack it with solar and geothermal and go beyond that. I do want to point out we've got an agrivoltaic summit at our department on September 26th. If anyone's interested, look for news on that. Interesting new conservation program that we'll be launching soon. And we're here to talk all about planning, zoning, permitting, and all of the fun things related to agriculture. So come seek us out.
Thank you.
I'm trying to explain my weight gain.
Secretary Grady.
Thank you. I don't have much to add. I just want to thank my colleagues on the cabinet for what I think is their really eloquent framing of the opportunities ahead of us. I want to thank the folks who participated for bringing your feedback for us, which is really important. I think this was a great discussion, and I continue to be inspired to do this work together.
Thank you. Secretary Wu.
Thank you, Secretary Flora. I just want to underscore something that Secretary Day mentioned in his remarks. Maryland net migration has been trending downward since 2011. We actually have been negative since 2015. We're finally turning around in 2023. And as he noted, a lot of out-migration it's actually driven by young people between 17 and 34, and they're going to Pennsylvania and Virginia. And what that means for county and municipal governments is that is your tax base, right? That is your young people, young families, workers who will contribute for 20, 30, 40 years if they settle in your community. And as Secretary Day mentioned, the top 2 reasons they're leaving are housing and commute. So the work of planning and driving that affordability and, how can I want to live somewhere where I can get to everything in 15, 20 minutes, not in an hour and 20 minutes, I think is absolutely critical. And as Secretary Anderson said, the planning aspects, bringing all this together is critical for our economic growth and for having those young workers. I know you all are always hearing from businesses saying, I could grow more, I just can't find the workers that I need. So I think that's how we as the Department of Labor want to continue to contribute to this conversation.
Thank you. And we have assistant or deputy?
Assistant Secretary.
Assistant Secretary. Yes, Scott Napier. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. General Services is here to support our sister agencies. and help implement their goals and their missions. As I've listened to everyone talk around the table, there's so many projects we're invested in and helping to support. We're the transaction arm, we're the boots on the ground, the procurement agency, just a couple of key projects. I know we're very invested in supporting the Department of Agriculture with the Agricultural Land Preservation Program. We're working to put EV charging stations at all of our state-owned and leased locations to help with that technology. We're very invested in House Bill 927 and very excited to look at our former state properties and whether they can be used for affordable housing. And the final item that I will mention is we are also excited with the reuse of historic complexes, just trying to make sure those facilities can be maintained well until we can find a new owner that will continue to revitalize and preserve them. So thank you, everyone.
Secretary Kurtz.
Great, thank you all. A couple things jump to mind that I wanted to just touch on. And one is when we talk about the new goals, and I really appreciated that comment. You know, you're seeing the numbers go up, but we're not thinking about it from just a quantity perspective. We're thinking about it from a quality perspective as well. And we need to be able to define that in our regs and through statute to ensure that the community knows what we are going to achieve with some of these higher numbers in terms of acreage that we're doing protection for. And I think we've heard a lot about forward thinking that, and that comes from learning from all of you. I think the staff that we have at the department really relishes the ability to build projects together. That allows those projects to sustain. And so I think when we are looking at our preservation goals, it's about building habitat quality. It's about building quality for human health. It's about building quality for cultural resources, as well as building quantity. So I think that that's really important. And I think we've touched on that in some of the changes we made here in the subcabinet. Going from conservation to vitality, I think, is really important. You know, vitality is about quality. And so we want to bring that to the forefront as well as we are continuing to up some of these goals. So thank you all for your participation today, and would happy to have a conversation with anybody afterwards.
Thank you. Director Howell. Great. Thank you all. And thank you for being here. It's been great to listen to folks and being relatively new to this position relative to my colleagues here. It's been really nice to get a better sense of what's really going on. And so I wanted to think a couple of things. One, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our PALS program at the National Center for Smart Growth, the Partnership for Action, Learning, and Sustainability. A lot of you have talked about questions that your community is facing or issues related to planning, design, architecture. You know, they've really run the gambit, and believe it or not, you know, we have access to a wide university of a lot of departments. And so what PALS does is connects faculty who are teaching a course with communities who need a project done. So we've worked with many of you in the room, actually many of my fellow colleagues here, their agencies, as well as county governments and nonprofits. So please do connect. You can look at our website, umdsmartgrowth.org, and you'll be able to find the PALS program. It's a great way to get involved. And I am now mic'd. Whoa, so sorry. So yeah, go to our website and find out about PALS, umdsmartgrowth.org. The second thing is, I think what's exciting to hear as we talk about this is that as we think about growth, and this is something we think about a lot at the National Center for Smart Growth, is not just about bringing in new people, because yes, we need to grow. We need to build like we want to grow, right? Other places are building like they want to grow. We need to do the same thing, but we also have communities that that are going to be impacted by that growth, right? And so we have to think about at the community level, and that's all y'all. Because y'all's not plural enough. So all y'all are already thinking about these things, right? And so one of the things we've been working on with the Purple Line Corridor Coalition is thinking about how do we accommodate growth that's coming as a result of this wonderful transit that's going to connect and really do the things we want to do, while also maintaining the communities that have been there. And that means those small businesses that have been really keeping the neighborhood vital. That's the neighbors that have really been putting in the work and really being part there. And so I think one of the things I would encourage is to push, I mean, feel free to push me. I don't know how much I can do, but feel free to push my colleagues as coalition members on the ground. We connect obviously already with folks at HCD around these issues, but this is something that I think is really important, and push your local officials and get them involved in a coalition, because I think that's really important, right? We have these communities that are vital as well, that are going to be impacted by growth. And so that's sort of the piece. And we are always happy to talk about coalition building. We've been doing that for 10 years in the Purple Line. So feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Secretary Day.
All right, thank you so much. Do any of you remember the Micro Machines commercials in like the late 1980s, early 1990s, and the guy who talked really fast? Let's see if I can do that. So look, several of the questions out here, as well as the questions we got in advance submitted from those who are attending virtually, have to do with housing and things that are within our portfolio. But let me touch on one first, real quick. Broadband. The question was, what's the plan to get broadband in underserved areas? So just so everyone understands, the last round of funding, the BEAD funding, which is going to be the last federal funding that we get to address unserved locations and underserved locations, the last funding that we can anticipate at this point, is the BEAD money that about $270 million comes to Maryland for that. With that money, we must serve 100% of the unserved locations, and we must serve as many of the underserved locations as we can. There are about 21,000 left. The FCC is going through a validating process right now to determine who is served. Counties are saying these are the places, these are the homes, the locations. So that means homes, businesses, farmhouses, outhouses, whatever, that are unserved. ISPs, the internet service providers, are saying, no, here's our list, and they're mapping and validating that right now. As we get through that process, we will have the application round coming in the spring. So spring of this coming year, that will be the time period to apply for those funds to serve those locations. We have about 21,000, give or take, locations unserved in Maryland. I want to point out that half of those are in 5 counties. Half of those are in Washington, Garrett, Carroll, Frederick, and St. Mary's County. So we have a lot of work to do in those areas. There are a couple jurisdictions like Wycomico and Worcester counties that are down to double digits, that are going to be able to serve 100% of theirs relatively affordable. Now, I do want to point out that anybody who's unserved today, it's likely because it's geographically difficult. It's disperse, diffuse land use patterns. That's likely the challenge. We just announced money to Smith Island to address one of those issues. So I hope that answers the question when asked. One of the other questions we got was, how can you reassure people that mixed use redevelopment with affordable housing integrated is a good thing? How do we do that from the local level? Well, isn't that the whole fight? Isn't that the whole question? We acknowledge, yeah, right. Yeah, I'm going to answer that in the next 34 seconds. But we acknowledge that, you have an immense burden at the county and municipal level in dealing with agitated constituents who are angry about change and are going to say, don't do that. In fact, I think I heard Mayor Scott, who gets to wear both the county and city hat when he shows up to both MACO and MML. I heard Mayor Scott once say that he learned 2 things in the first day as mayor. First was, man, everybody wants everything to just happen real fast. Change has to happen quickly. Second thing was, nobody wants anything to change. So you experience that burden sitting behind the council dais every day. You experience it when you walk through your grocery store and constituents stop you. So we're not going to solve that overnight, but I do think it's worth pointing out that the burden is falling on our residents who can least afford to address the issue, least afford to get themselves into a stable, safe housing setting, least afford to move out from their parents' house, least afford to move into independent living. And so I think it's worth pointing out that as we do an analysis of what 60% AMI looks like today, and then compare that to the wages being offered in your community, I think it becomes very stark that, we're not even producing housing for our own teachers. We're not even able to house, with low-income housing tax credits, our own teachers, our own firefighters, our own police officers, our own public works employees. And so it becomes very stark that we have a heavy lift ahead of us. And we're not talking about, many of the ways in which housing has been framed historically. The problem is addressing more of society today. So I think that's where we have to shift the conversation and use specific examples of what a family looks like today that would qualify for affordable housing and low-income housing tax credits. There are also questions about accelerating housing production in the commercial tax base too, and how we integrate those things. Now, look, our roads are clogged, not because we have too many people. Our roads are clogged because of how we built our communities. And if we don't change that, and if we don't also acknowledge that county governments and city governments and state government can't afford low density single use sprawl, we can't afford it because we can't pay to maintain it. If we build it today, and if we're lucky enough to build it, it's not going to be maintained, and we're going to bankrupt our communities on the backs of that, then we're always going to be fighting an uphill battle. So I think we have to have that tough, honest conversation with our constituents. I know I get like 10 more things to do, but we're out of time and we got to go see the boss. So.
Okay, I get to work with these people. Thank you all. I want to just give you all a hand. Thank you. And I want to thank all of you and all of those people that joined us online for gathering with us today and just hearing and sharing. Maryland Department of Planning is to be what I think of as the integrator. We're the ones that help connect the dots amongst all these various pieces of what we're trying to put together to create thriving communities. And so you're all part of that. We're all part of it. Thrilled that we could have this conversation today, and more to come. Stay tuned. And we got to run. You all have to run, but I hope this is, continuum, not an end. So thank you all again. Thank you.